Hi, my name is Prerak Sharma. I am the first year student of MBA Data Science and AI at IIT Mandi. I have decided to improve my communication skills by practicing daily for 20 minutes, either reading, discussing, or talking to someone. Currently, I'll be reading. At present, I'll read this book, Steve Jobs, for 20 minutes, and we'll see how the series goes on without wasting much time. I'll start reading. It's your call if you want to stay or you want to leave. Let me switch my camera a little bit. Yeah, it's fine now. After the settlement, Jobs continued. After the settlement, Jobs continued to quote Slinger until the designer decided to wind down his contract with Apple. That allowed Frog Design to work with Next at the end of 1986. Slinger insisted on having free reign, just as Paul, and sometimes you have to use a big stick with Steve. Like Ron, Islinger was an artist, so Jobs was willing to grant him indulgences he denied either other mortals. Jobs decreed that the computer should be an absolutely perfect cube, with each side exactly a foot long and each angle precisely 90 degrees. He liked cubes. They had gravitas, but also the slight whiff of a toy. But the next cube was just be an example of design desires trumping engineering considerations. The circuit boards, which fitted nicely into the traditional pizza box, had to be reconfigured and stacked in order to nestle into a cube. Even worse, the perfection of the cube made it hard to manufacture. Most parts that are cast in molds have angles that are slightly greater than pure 90 degrees, so that it's easier to get them out of the mold, just as it is easier to get cake out of the pan that has angles slightly greater than 90 degrees. But Esslinger Esslinger dictated, and Jobs enthusiastically agreed that there would be no such draft angles that would ruin the purity and perfection of the cube, so the sides had to be produced separately using molds that cost $650,000 at a specialty machine shop in Chicago. Jobs' passion for perfection was out of control when he noticed a tiny line in the chassis caused by mold, something that any other computer maker would accept is unavoidable. He flew to Chicago and convinced the die-caster to start over and do it perfectly. Not a lot of die-casters expect a celebrity to fly in, noted one of the engineers. Jobs also had the company buy a $150,000 sanding machine to remove all lines where the mold faces met, and insisted that the magnesium case to be a matte black, which made it more susceptible to showing blemishes. Jobs had always indulged his obsession that the unseen parts of a product should be crafted as beautifully as its facade, just as his father had taught him when they were building a fence. This too he took to extremes when he found himself unfettered at Next. He made sure that the screws inside the machine had expensive plating. He even insisted that the matte black finish be coated onto the inside of the cube's case, even though only repairmen would see it. Joe Nocera, then writing for Esquire, captured Jobs' intensity at a next staff meeting. It's not quite right to say that he is sitting through this staff meeting because Jobs doesn't sit through much of anything. One of the way he dominates is through sheer movement. One moment he's kneeling in his chair, the next moment he's slouching in it, the next he has leaped out of his chair entirely and is scribbling on blackboard directly behind him. He's full of mannerisms. He bites his nails, he stares with unnerving earnestness at whoever is speaking. His hands, which are slightly and inexplicably yellow, are in constant motion. What particularly struck Nocera was Job's almost pitiful lack of tact. It was more than just an inability to hide his opinions from others. When others said something he thought dumb, it was a conscious readiness, even a perverse eagerness to put people down, humiliate them, show he was smarter. When Dan Lewin handed out an organization chart, for example, Joe rolled out, "These charts are bullshit," he insisted. Yet his mood sank widely. As at Apple, a finance person came into the meeting. Jobs lavished praise on him for a really great job on this. The previous day, Jobs had told him, "This deal is crap." One of the next first 10 employees was an interior designer for the company's first headquarters in Palo Alto. Even though Jobs had less leased a building that was new and nicely designed, he had it completely gutted and rebuilt. Walls were replaced by glass. The carpets were replaced by light hardwood flooring. The process was repeated when next moved to a bigger space in Redwood City in 1989. Even though the building was brand new, Jobs insisted that the elevators be moved so that the entrance lobby would be more dramatic as a centerpiece. Jobs commissioned IMPA to design a grand staircase that seemed to float in the air. The contractor said that it couldn't be built. Jobs said it could, and it was. Years later, Jobs would make such a staircase at the signature store to design that seemed to float in the air. The computer. During the early months of Next, Jobs and Dan Levin went on the road, often accompanied by a few colleagues to visit campuses and solicit opinions. At Harvard, they met Mitch Kapper, the chairman of Lotus Software, over dinner at Harvard restaurant. When Kapper began slathering butter on his bread, Jobs asked him, "Have you ever heard of a serum cholesterol? Kapper, I'll make you a deal. You stay away from commenting on my dietary habits, and I will stay away from the subject of your personality." It was meant humorously, but as Kapper later commented, human relationships were not his strong suit. Lotus agreed to write a spreadsheet program for the next OS. Jobs wanted to bundle useful content with the machines, so Michael Howley, one of the engineers, developed a digital dictionary. He learned that a friend of his at Oxford University Press had been involved in the typesetting of a new edition of Shakespeare's works. That meant that there was probably a computer tape he could get his hands on, and if so, incorporate into the next memory. So I called Steve, and he said that would be awesome, and we flew over to Oxford together. On a beautiful spring day in 1986, they met in the publishing house's grand building in the heart of Oxford, where Jobs made an offer of $2,000 plus 74 cents for every computer sold in order to have the rights to Oxford's edition of Shakespeare. "It will be all gravy of you. You will be ahead of the parade, never done before." They agreed in principle, and then went out to play skittles over beer at a nearby pub where Lord Byron used to drink. By the time it launched, the next would also include a dictionary, a thesaurus, and the Oxford Dictionary of Quotation, making it one of the pioneers of the concept of searchable electronic books. Call up Steve would be awesome. They met in the publication a digital dictionary. He learned that a friend of his at Oxford University Press had been involved in the type testing of a new edition of Shakespeare's works. That meant that there was probably a computer tape he could get his hands on, and if so, incorporate into it the next memory. So I called up Steve, and he said that would be awesome, and we flew over to Oxford together. On a beautiful spring day in 1986, they met in the publishing house's grand building, where Jobs made an offer of $2,000 plus 74 cents for every computer sold in order to have the rights to Oxford's edition of Shakespeare. Next World would next would also use a dictionary, a thesaurus, and the Oxford Dictionary of Quotations, making it one of the pioneers of the concept of searchable electronic books. Instead of using off-the-shelf chips for the next, Jobs had his engineers design custom ones that integrated a variety of functions on one chip. That would have been hard enough, but Jobs made it almost impossible by continually revising the functions he wanted it to do. After a year, it became clear that this would be a major source of delay. He also insisted on building his own fully automated and futuristic factory, just as he had for Macintosh. He had not been chastened by that experience. This time, too, he made the same mistakes, only more excessively. Machines and robots were painted and repainted as he compulsively revised his color scheme. The walls were museum weight, as they had been at the Mac factory, and there were 20,000 black leather chairs and a custom made staircase, just as in the corporate headquarters. He insisted that the machinery on this 165-foot assembly line be configured to move the circuit boards from right to left as they got built, so that the process would look better to visitors who watched from the viewing gallery. Empty circuit boards were fed in at one end, and 20 minutes later, untouched by humans, came out the other end as completed boards. So he said that the machinery on the 165-foot assembly line be configured to move the circuit boards from right to left as they got built, so that the process would look better to visitors who watched from the viewing gallery. Empty circuit boards were fed in at one end, and 20 minutes later, untouched by humans, came out the other end as completed solid-state boards. The process followed the Japanese principle known as Kanban, in which each machine performs its task only when the next machine is ready to receive another part. Jobs had not tempered his way of dealing with employees. He applied charm or public humiliation in a way that in most cases proved to be pretty effective. Tribble recalled, but sometimes it wasn't. One engineer, David Paulson, put in 90-hour weeks for the first 10 months at Next. He quit when Steve walked in one Friday afternoon and told us how unimpressed he was with what we were doing. When Business Week asked him why he treated employees so harshly, Jobs said it made the company better. Part of my responsibility is to be a yardstick of quality. Some people aren't used to an environment where excellence is expected. But he still had his spirit and charisma. There were plenty of field trips, visits by Aikido masters, and off-site retreats, and he still exuded the pirate flag's punkiness. When Apple fired Chiarte, the ad firm that had done the 1984 ad and taken on newspaper welcome IBM seriously, Jobs took on a full-page ad in the Wall Street Journal proclaiming, "Congratulations, Chiarte seriously, because I can guarantee you there is life after Apple." Perhaps the greatest similarity to his days at Apple was that Jobs brought with him his reality distortion field. It was on display at the company's first retreat at Pebble Beach in late 1985, where Jobs pronounced that the first Next computer would be shipped in just 18 months. It was already clear that this date was impossible, but he blew off a suggestion from one engineer that they be realistic and plan on shipping in 1988. If we do that, the world isn't standing still. The technology window passes us by, and all the work we have done, we have to throw it down the toilet, he argued. Joanna Hoffman, the veteran of the Macintosh team, who was among those willing to challenge Jobs, did so. Reality distortion has motivational value, and I think that's fine, she said as Jobs stood on a whiteboard. However, when it comes to setting a date in a way that affects the design of the product, then we get into real deep shit. Jobs didn't agree. "I think we have to drive a stake in the ground somewhere, and I think if we miss this window, then our credibility starts to erode." What he did not say, even though it was suspected by all, was that if their target slipped, they might run out of money. Jobs had pledged $7 million of his own funds, but at the current burn rate, the app would run out in 18 months if they didn't start getting some revenue from shipped products. 3 months later, when they returned to Pebble Beach for the next retreat, Job began his list of maximum that the honeymoon is over. By the time of the third retreat in Sonoma in September 1986, the timetable was gone, and it looked as the company would hit a financial wall. In late 1986, Jobs sent out a proposal to venture capital firms offering a 10% stake in Next for $3 million. That put a valuation on the company 30 million, a number that Jobs had pulled off out of thin air. Less than 7 million had gone into the company thus far, and there was a little to show for it. Other than a neat logo and some snazzy offices, it had no revenue or products, nor any on the horizon. Not surprisingly, the venture capitalists all passed on the offer to invest. There was, however, one cowboy who was dazzled: Ross Perot, the Bantam, Texas, who had founded Electronic Data System, then sold it to General Motors for $2.4 billion, happened to watch a PBS documentary, The Entrepreneurs, which had a segment on Jobs and Next. In November 1986, he instantly identified with Jobs and his gang, so much so that as he watched them on television, he said, "I was finishing their sentences for them." It was a line eerily, airily similar to one Scully had often used. Perret called Jobs the next day and offered, "If you ever need an investor, call me." Jobs did indeed need one badly, but he was careful not to show it. He waited a week before calling back. Perret sent some of his analysts to size up Next, but Jobs took care to deal directly with Perret. One of his great regrets in life, Perret later said, that was that he had not bought Microsoft or a large stake in it when a very young Bill Gates had come to visit him in Dallas. By the time Parrott called Jobs, Microsoft had just gone public with $1 billion valuation. Parrott had missed out the opportunity to make a lot of money and have a fun adventure. He was eager not to make the mistake again. He was careful not to show it. Jobs made an offer to Parrott that was three times more costly than had quietly been offered to venture capitalists a few months earlier. For $20 million, Perez agreed to get 16% of equity in the company after Jobs put in another $5 million. That meant the company would be valued at $126 million, but money was not a major consideration of Perret. After meeting with Jobs, he declared that he wasn't. I picked the jockeys and the jockeys picked the horses and ride them. He told Jobs, "You guys are the ones I'm betting on, so you figure it out." Perret brought to next something that was almost as valuable as $20 million lifeline. He was quotable, spirited cheerleader for the company who would lend it an air of credibility among grown-ups. In terms of startup company, is one that carries the least risk of any I've seen in 25 years in the computers industry. He told the New York Times, "We have had some sophisticated people see the hardware. It blew them away." Steve and his whole next team are the darndest bunch of perfectionists I've ever seen. Perret also traveled in rare field social and business circles that complemented Jobs' own. He took Jobs to a black tie dinner dance in San Francisco that Gordon and Anne Getty gave for King Juan Carlos I of Spain. When the king asked Perret whom he should meet, Perret immediately produced Jobs. They soon engaged in what Perret later describes electric conversation. A rare field social and business circles that complemented Jobs' own. He took Jobs to black tie dinner in San Francisco, gave for King Juan. When the king asked Perret whom he should meet, Perret immediately produced Jobs. They were soon engaged in what Perret later described as electric conversation, with Jobs animatedly describing the next wave in computing. At the end, the king scribbled a note and handed it to Jobs. "What happened?" Perret asked. Jobs answered, "I sold him a computer." These and the other stories were incorporated into the mythologized story of Jobs that Perret told wherever we want. At a briefing at the National Press Club in Washington, he spun Jobs' life story into a Texas-sized yarn about a young man so poor he couldn't afford to go to college, working in his garage at night, playing with computer chips, which was his hobby, and his dad, who looks like a character. Jobby comes in one day. "Steve, either make something you can sell or go get a job." 60 days later, in a wooden box that his dad made for him, the first Apple computer was created, and this high school graduate literally changed the world. At a briefing at the National Press Club in Washington, he spun Jobs' life story into a Texas-sized yarn about a young man so poor he couldn't afford to go to college, working in his garage at night, playing with computer chips. The one phrase that was true was the one, Paul Jobs looking like someone in a Rockwell painting, and perhaps the last phrase, the Jobs changing the world. Certainly, Perret believed the Scully he saw himself in Jobs. "Steve is like me." Perret told the Washington Post David Remick, "We are weird in the same way. We are soulmates." Gates and next. Bill Gates was not a soulmate. Jobs had convinced him to produce software applications for Macintosh, which had turned out to be hugely profitable for Microsoft. But Gates was one person who was resistant to Jobs' reality distortion field, and as a result, he decided not to create software tailor for next platform. Gates went to California to get periodic demonstration, but each time he came away unimpressed. The Mac team was truly unique. But I personally don't understand what is so unique about Steve's new computer, he told Fortune. Part of the problem was that the rival titans were congenitally unable to be differential to each other. When Gates made his first visit to Next Palo Alto headquarters in the summer of 1987, Jobs kept him waiting for half an hour in the lobby. Even though Gates could see through the glass walls that Charles was walking around having casual conversation, I had gone down to Next and I had the Odwalla, the most expensive carrot juice I'd never seen in tech offices so lavish, Gates recalled, shaking his head with just a hint of smile, and Steve comes a half hour later to the meeting. Jobs' sales pitch, according to Gates, was simple. "We did the Mac together." Jobs said, "How did that work for you?" "Very well. Now we are going to do this together and this is going to be great." Jobs sales pitch. "We did the Mac together." "Worked very well. Now we're going to do this together and this is going to be great." But Gates was brutal to Jobs, just as Jobs could be to others. "This machine is crap." Part of the problem was that the rival titans were congenitally unable to be differential to each other. When Gates made his first visit to next headquarters in the summer, Jobs kept him waiting for half an hour in the lobby, even though Gates could see through the glass walls that Jobs was walking around having casual conversation and got down to next. And I had the Odwalla, the most expensive carrot juice, and I had never seen tech offices so lavish. Gates recalled, shaking his head with just a hint of smile, as Steve comes a half hour late to the meeting. Jobs' sales pitch, according to Gates, was simple. We did the math together. How did that work for you? Very well. Now we're going to do this together, and this is going to be great. But Gates was brutal to Jobs, just as Jobs could be to others. This machine is crap, he said. The optical disc has too low latency. The fucking case is too expensive. This thing is ridiculous, he decided then, and reaffirmed on each subsequent visit that it made no sense for Microsoft to divert resources from other projects to develop applications for Next. Worse yet, he repeatedly said so publicly, which made others less likely to spend in developing for Next. Develop for it, I'll piss on it, he told InfoWorld. When they happened to meet in the hallway at a conference, Jobs started berating Gates for his refusal to. When you get a market, I will consider it, Gates replied. Jobs quoting, it was a screaming battle right in front of everybody. They called Adele Goldberg the Xerox PARC engineer. Jobs insisted that Next was the next wave of computing. Gates, as often he did, got more expressionless. As Job got more heated, he finally just shook his head and walked away. Beneath their personal rivalry and occasional grudging respect was their basic philosophical difference. Jobs believed in an end-to-end integration of hardware and software, which led him to build a machine that was not compatible with others. Case believed in and profited from a world in which different companies made machines that were compatible with one another. Their hardware ran standard operating system Microsoft Windows and could all use the same software as apps such as Microsoft Word and Excel. His product comes with an interesting feature called incompatibility, Gates told the Washington Post. It doesn't run any of the existing software. It's a super nice computer. I don't think if I went out to design an incompatible computer, I would have done as well as he did. At a forum in Cambridge, Massachusetts, in 1989, Jobs and Gates appeared sequentially, sequentially laying out their competing worldviews. Jobs spoke about how new waves come along in computer industry every few years. Macintosh had launched a revolutionary new product with the graphical interface. Now Next was doing it with object-oriented programming tied to a powerful new machine based on an optical disk. Every major software vendor realized they had to be a part of this new wave, he said, except Microsoft. When Gates came up, he reiterated his belief that Jobs' end-to-end control of the software and the hardware was destined for failure, just as Apple had failed in competing against Microsoft Windows Standard. The hardware market and software market are separate. Separate, he said. When asked about the great design that could come from Jobs' approach, Gates gestured to the next prototype that was still sitting on stage and said, if you want black, I'll get you a can of paint. Jobs came up with a brilliant jujutsu maneuver against Gates, one that could have changed the balance of power in the computer industry forever. It required Jobs to do two things that were against his nature: licensing out his software to another hardware maker and making it to bet with IBM. He had pragmatic streak, albeit a tiny one, so he was able to overcome his reluctance, but his heart was never fully in it, which is why the alliance would turn out to be short-lived. It began at a party, a truly memorable one, for the 17th birthday of Washington Post publisher Katharine Graham in June 1987 in Washington. 600 guests attended, including President Ronald Reagan. Jobs flew in from California and IBM's chairman, John Akers from New York. It was the first time they had met. Jobs took the opportunity to badmouth Microsoft and attempt to wean IBM from using its Windows OS. I couldn't resist telling him I thought IBM was taking a giant gamble betting its entire software strategy on Microsoft because I didn't think its software was very good. To Jobs' delight, because how would you like to help us? Within a few weeks, Jobs showed up at IBM's Armonk, New York headquarters with a software engineer, Bud Ribble. They put on a demo of Next, which impressed the IBM engineers. Of particularly significant was Next Step, the machine's object-oriented operating system. took care of a lot of trivial programming codes that slow down software development process set and really so impressed by Jobs that he named his newborn son Steve. The negotiation lasted till into 1988 with becoming disagree Jobs becoming prickly. He would talk out of meetings or disagreements. I believe I am in 231 page of Steve Jobs books. I believe 20 minutes are over for now. I just wanted that dopamine hit. I'll continue doing this for a long period of time. I will continue doing this, so I would like to keep my initial beginnings small and clear so that my brain doesn't get bored. It gets this daily dopamine hit by just recording the video, talking for 20 minutes and uploading it. Thank you so much for watching. You can contact me through Twitter or LinkedIn. Links are in the description below. Bye. Subscribe if you want. Do like my video and comment anything that you feel like. Thank you so much.